Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar this afternoon. We're very excited to have our two guests, Dr. Rebecca Kammer and Regina Marian Lovo. And this is really a global event today. Karen and Regina are in Joburg. Becky is in Irvine, California, and I'm in Mauritius. And Hazel, if she could have joined, would have been on the plane. So welcome to everybody. And just before Becky introduces herself, Becky doesn't actually realize this, but this whole thing actually started after we met her in 2016. Becky was out in Tanzania and then came to South Africa. And at that stage, Becky was involved with the miniature implantable telescope. And they were looking at doing it in South Africa, and we were chatting to Becky, and she came around and did a talk to us. There were, I think, 12 of us that afternoon, and it was just such an inspirational afternoon chatting to colleagues that we sometimes lose touch with, and we decided based on that afternoon to start having monthly meetings. So, Becky, you were inspirational for a lot of this, and on the basis of that, over to you, and if you'll please introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Oh, that makes me feel so happy. Thank you. I do remember that day, and it was really great. We had some really good conversations, and we had optometrists and occupational therapists and mobility specialists and others who were participating in the care of visually impaired persons, and it was so great to hear different perspectives, because sometimes you only stay with your one discipline or your one profession, and that can be very limiting. So I'm super happy about that. Well, you can call me Becky, not Rebecca, but I always have Rebecca on there just because it's just a habit, I guess. But I have a doctor of optometry degree and then a PhD, and the PhD is actually in education. So I was teaching for many years in colleges of optometry and in low vision rehabilitation, but first was in geometric and physical optics. So I have a first degree in engineering, optical engineering. And so I love how devices work. And so over the years, I left academia about 7 or 8 years ago, I think. And I went into consulting and worked with various companies who are working on either devices for visual impairment or on studies with interventions and potential treatments for conditions. And currently I'm working with JSight, which has a treatment for retinitis pigmentosa. And I do some of the study design. So I've gotten much more into research, and I did stop seeing patients in a clinic in last year. So I do miss that. I worked with my connection with albinism in Africa, though, started about 12 years ago, 11, 12, maybe even a little longer. And I was awake one night, couldn't sleep, and I watched a documentary about albinism in Tanzania and East Africa. And I was just horrified at how people were being treated. And I'm going to introduce Regina Mary in just a second, but basically I started hearing about just horrific incidences in Tanzania and beliefs that people with albinism were lucky, or their body parts or their hair or their blood would make someone rich and have magical powers, and just ridiculous ideas, but that were, very, I won't talk too much about that, but I was horrified. And I thought, if I could do something for people with albinism, if I could help people understand vision, that it's just visual impairment, not total blindness, and that with some basic devices and aids, we might be able to help them be able to have education and be able to participate in society. At least I thought maybe I could make a difference in Tanzania. So I contacted Under the Same Sun, and I got involved with them pretty quickly. And I went over and I did my first clinics, and the clinics were very challenging, because I brought a couple students. They insisted that they go with me, and I was so happy that they did. And they're now in practice today, and we are able to share some of our early stories. But when we first went, we were seeing kids that were placed in these refugee camps, basically. I mean, they were called government schools, but they were just horrific conditions. 3 or 4 children to a bed, not clean, and definitely not learning in that environment. The education was not there for them. And they were placed there with anybody else who had disabilities, but just was not structured well for anybody with disabilities, much less children with albinism. And my heart broke, of course. And I thought, just, what else can I do? So I worked with Under the Same Sun, and we set up some programs, some clinics for helping children, check the vision. And what I found is that they were really, really nearsighted, highly myopic. And I thought, okay, if I could do something, at least with supplying glasses and supplying devices that they need, then maybe we could, again, get to this kind of dream of helping children and young adults participate in society and change their own country, with perceptions and so on. So I've worked with UTSS for several years, and was fantastic partners. You can see me in the middle there. I went through a dark hair change, explored. I'd always been blonde, and I explored with some darker reddish hair, which was fun. And then later, a few years later, I met Standing Voice, and Standing Voice was an organization. I have an extra C in there, I just realized, but they wanted to really spread the work that I was doing in these clinics with vision across the country of Tanzania, and hopefully further out into other parts of Africa as well. And so it was over that time that we developed a system, a way to see a lot of people in a short period of time. It wasn't really thorough low vision examinations or even really thorough eye examinations. It was more as quick as we could, see as many people as we could, because just access to the care was so limited. You have optometrists in Tanzania, but only very few that were specifically trained in low vision, and they would have to go to another country to really learn that. And so I only knew of about 3 clinics that had any low vision care, and they weren't going out into the area, into the remote areas. They were just really staying in one location. And so I, worked to really, how do we make this fast and be able to see as many people, but as thorough as we can? And then how are we going to provide the actual tools they need? Because most of these children, we were mostly seeing children, and some adults, if they were working employed, but mostly children. And how do we get them glasses, especially really farsighted, nearsighted glasses, myopic glasses, plus any kind of magnifiers? So there were some creative things that we did, and we were able to provide some simple magnifiers. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I got to talk about specific vision and needs specific to Africa. But along the way, just a couple years ago, 4 years ago, I was invited to go on a hike to support women who were going on a hike for albinism, an advocacy hike. And this group had decided they wanted to have different women from different countries in Africa represent albinism and to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And I heard about it and, of course, was like, let me go. And they said, no, if you could just help us provide the glasses and the different things we need. And I said, sure, I can support that. But inside, I really wanted to hike. And I was exercising, and I was actually hiking with my husband because he was going to go on a hike. So I was pretty fit and kind of ready, not necessarily ready for Mount Kilimanjaro, but I thought I was fairly ready. And one thing led to another, and I ended up able to go on the hike. And it was an amazing experience. And that is where I met Regina Mary. And we had some correspondence ahead of time about glasses, so I could help supply, these sunglasses and different glasses that the participants needed. But sorry, Regina Mary, I don't have a very good picture of you without any of your gear, but I went through my phone last night and I'm like, I need to have a couple of pictures of her. So she was always very well covered, very good advocate for protecting your skin, and so and then we also partnered with a dermatology group in New York who provided some really nice sunscreen for our gals and such. And so this is picture on the right is me with some of the guides, and then this is a couple pictures of our journey, which was just amazing and very difficult. And you see Kilimanjaro in the background, but the climate really had changed from this really lush green to, as we hiked up, this really barren, almost moonscape type of situation. But it was cold up there, definitely. You think of Africa and warm, but as soon as you get to elevation, it gets very cold. And so Regina Mary is here on the right. So she is just an amazing individual, and we have stayed really good friends, and we send each other voice notes on WhatsApp all the time, and they're sometimes 20 minutes long, and they're my favorite thing when I'm going to work, and I listen and then I'll respond. And so we share these voice notes. It's a little easier than typing all of our updates. We have a lot of things in common, but we were buddies during the hike. We were able to hike together quite a bit of the time and just encourage one another. And we're both Christians, and so we would share scripture and talk about some of those things as well in our spiritual journeys. So it was really a beautiful time, and we kept in touch. But she is just an amazing person, has an amazing story, and we'll have to do some follow-up sometime where we get more deeply into her story. And we've been talking about doing that for a long time, Regina Mary. This is our first time doing something together online, so I'm really excited for the opportunity. But Regina Mary, why don't you just give us a little idea? She's a big advocate and activist, and so she's involved in a lot of things, and she's an actress and has many talents of singing and dancing and all sorts of things. But could you give us a little introduction to yourself, and then we'll come back a little bit later at the end, not the end, but in 10 or 15 minutes, and we'll spend a little more time unpacking some of your life.
Wow, thank you so much. Wow. um, Thank you. Thank you to everybody. Thank you, Rebecca. This is amazing. And yes, my name is Regina Mary, and I am an actress, a motivational speaker, and I've been called a human rights activist by the powerful grace of God, and a story that once was a hindrance and a very shameful one to tell, but now has become a voice for 1,000 people and myself, and it has just been an awesome life to live. And yeah, I just want to go back a bit. Rebecca said we met on the Kilimanjaro climb, and it was awesome, but she didn't mention that she actually saved me. So because of my albinism, when I was born, the information was just not enough. So basically, I'm just going to share this little part. It's very important, and then we can come back. And because the information was not so out there, like teachers didn't know, doctors didn't know, my foundation of education was very, very disturbed. So I never learned how to read and write for almost throughout my life. And it's something I am overcoming today and making sure I take ownership of it. So when they had posted that, hey, do you want to change the world? Do you want to climb? Do you want to walk on Kilimanjaro and change the world and be part of this women for albinism? I had no idea what Kilimanjaro was about. I had no idea what this whole journey was about, but I just had the passion to say, oh my God, we're going to climb, we're going to voice out, I'll be part of something that's great that voices out for people with albinism. So when I got to this amazing camp and this training, it was like a nightmare, and I didn't know what to do because I had not trained. I had not known everything. Everything just felt like my world was falling apart. And this amazing angel called Rebecca came in the picture, and she just acted like it's okay, it's fine. She spoke to me, she walked with me as slow as I was. We talked about the Lord, but I would like to say she saved me, and I managed to take a few days in, but that's how our journey started. And I just want to say thank you so much, because I totally didn't know, and I didn't read, and I didn't understand, but I was so passionate about saying I have to contribute to albinism. So that's what happened. So that was like a start. So thank you so much for that. And ever since then, it has been a great, awesome experience. And it's so nice to actually have these discussions where we can honestly talk about the truth about what is happening in terms of a person with albinism like myself. You know, sometimes we try to get into the topics, but it's like it's too much to say. But it would be really, really fair to literally open up about the actual, you know, problems that we have. Just like now, as much as I want to see everybody, but I have to come in like this, like, oh, there's Rebecca, there's everybody, and that's how it is. But because maybe I feel to be too much, but it's fine. So thank you to everybody. Thank you for this moment. Thank you to the fact that it's time to acknowledge that we are human beings, and around there in Africa, especially Tanzania, so many bad things are happening. There's killings, there's discrimination, there's misunderstandings in high schools. It's so bad in homes. It's something that is not yet cleared out, but we're trying. Our voices are trying. But in terms of the eyesight, that's even another extra, I wouldn't say it's a burden, because one, not being able to see and not understanding to what extent you cannot see is a problem. So knowing that there's a platform like this where somebody can actually tell you that there's a reason you cannot see when you take off your glasses and you're trying to read something, or a reason you cannot see certain things, or you feel you're trying to struggle and you're trying to get words together, and there's a possibility, there's a chance that next time a child goes into school, they're going to have the opportunity to be able to see the writings on the board, the writings in their book. And even if the challenges outside are very heavy, but knowing that I can be able to educate myself, I can be able to read and find information out there that can make me a successful woman, that is the one thing that is so powerful. So thank you again. Thank you so much. I'll probably go on and talk forever if you don't stop me. So please do let me know when I need to stop.
That's perfect. So we'll transition into kind of the anatomy of the eye a little bit and kind of approaches to low vision. We have some people on here who are low vision providers, who are doctors or therapists. And then I think we have other people who are just curious, and all of which is great. So hopefully we can speak not too technical for some, but technical enough for others so they can actually get some tips and help some patients and friends of their own. And hopefully if you're just listening and you do have albinism, you can think about this, I need to find somebody who knows this stuff, who understands this better. It's not your regular eye doctors who understand this. And I used to think that when I was going to school, we would learn about every eye disease and so on, whether it's ophthalmology or optometry. There's kind of these general things that you learn. And when I went to Tanzania, and I even had patients, and I was a low vision specialist, and I had patients with albinism that were in my clinic, and I thought, okay, they're fairly straightforward to help. I need to help with glare and lighting control and a little bit of magnification and so on. But it was kind of one of my more straightforward patient management plans. But when I got to Tanzania, it was like I had to learn a whole new area, because there's these subtleties, and yes, there's similar things from the US to Africa and all over the world in terms of albinism and characteristics, but how it's actually experienced in that environment, the social environment. And then of course, what I found, I was very surprised, was really, really high myopia. So, that I'll talk a little bit more about that as I go on. So most of the pictures that are in here are from Harry Freeland, who is the head of Standing Voice. Standing Voice is an organization that I still work with, and I'm the director of low vision services. But there are people now who are doing that on a regular basis in country, and so I haven't been there in a couple of years, especially with COVID. It makes me sad, but they're still running their clinics without me, so they're doing a great job. And when they need some advice or input, that's when I kind of jump in. But I'm not going a lot these days. But Harry is an amazing photographer and producer. He actually created a documentary, and that's what kind of kicked off his interest in the work in Tanzania in providing both skincare and vision care. I met this young man. He's now much older, and he's doing great, but he was attacked and did lose part of his arm on one, and then I think he has a birth defect on the other arm, but he is a survivor, and he's amazing. And so this is not about feeling pity necessarily. It's about saying, how can I come alongside, and what can I use in my talents and my strengths to help other human beings. So when we started doing our clinics, one key thing that I used was retinoscopy. And I have this child holding up a ret bar. You wouldn't normally do that, but I just thought it was the cutest thing, because sometimes what I'll do with the retinoscopy bars, and that's just a tool that we use to check prescriptions, so that I can check basically a glasses prescription on anyone who's newborn, can't speak, anything, just by looking in the eye, shining this little light, and the way that the light moves gives me indication of whether they're nearsighted or farsighted, or whether there's astigmatism. And if you're really good at that, you can get really, really close to the prescription. Now, I was pretty good at that because I use that in my special clinic at home all the time. However, when I got there, you're talking about doing retinoscopy, this little light test on somebody who's light sensitive and who doesn't really want to make eye contact because they're shy and have not interacted too much, and especially not with somebody a white female doctors, because it's many more males were in the kind of doctor professions there in Tanzania. So I was a little bit unique for them, but getting them to take a look and me take a look and so on was challenging. But with this lens, I could have them hold it up and take a look at which lens might be best. So it was kind of like doing refraction with which lens is better by just having them kind of look at which lens might be better. And it was just a clue, another piece of information. This little lens bar is black, so that means it's a plus. So this child is hyperopic and he's holding up a +6. So kind of telling already in terms of, oh, this gives me a clue, especially if I couldn't get a good view with my light. So there's tips and tricks that can be learned when you're doing these kind of remote things all the time. So this was my first Under the Same Sun. Peter Ash is on the right. He's a really great partner, and he did quite a bit to get services to and get these children from being in those big camps to being put out into back in either their areas, but in safer schools, in integrated schools. We never want to put kids with albinism just all isolated and in a blind school, for example. That would not be good. We want them to be integrated in daily classroom and just supply them with the tools that they need. So it's one of the first things I found when I went to Tanzania is that people were trying to put together, like nice nonprofit groups were trying to put together Braille schools, and teach kids Braille. I'm like, no, they have a lot of vision. We just have to help them use that vision and use it in better ways. So that was kind of my goal, was also educating NGOs as they came into the country with different goals. So Standing Voice, once I worked with them, it was kind of broaden our program. And this is an example of kind of doing an exam in a school where, we got to control the lighting a little bit because I needed it dimmer to do my retinoscopy. I brought charts with me and found a way and worked with a company to create a roll-up chart so I could put it in my suitcase and bring it over and then tape it to the walls. So always, creative ways of doing things using trial lenses and such, and then always translation. I was always moving and working so fast. I never really learned the language very well, so I do feel bad about that. Languages are real tough for me, but it is very important if you are working with a group to try to learn language. Okay, so types of albinism. So there's different types. OCA1, oculocutaneous albinism, is what that stands for. Type 1 is where there's really no pigment. So Peter Ash, the picture I showed you a little bit earlier, has the white hair and very, very fair skin. So that means there's really no pigment. And there's issues with blockages of the protein that are creating pigment. And so it could be that there's no pigment or there's a little bit of pigment. This picture of this young man on the right is actually a unique presentation. It still might be a type 2, OCA2 genetic kind of cause. But these little deposits it's still not very well known why some of the little patchy skin, but it doesn't affect the vision at all. So the vision is the same as anybody else who didn't have these little pigment spots on them. So there's a couple different theories out there, but this just may be one presentation that's seen. There are other types of oculocutaneous albinism. There's a red, it's called rufous, where it has kind of a reddish tint to the skin and pigment and such. There's syndromes, and some of the syndromes can be really tough. Hermansky-Pudlak syndrome is one that just has a lot of complications in the whole body itself. Then there's ocular albinism, and sometimes people mistake these two. Ocular albinism is where skin totally looks normal, the pigment, let's say brown hair, a brownish skin, and yet the eyes would be limited in the amount of pigment or melanin. And so there would be ocular causes and ocular issues, which I'll go over, but not the rest of skin. So that takes a little more checking by the doctors to figure that one out. In East Africa and also quite a bit of sub-Saharan Africa, there's been a lot of work done. Murray Brilliant was one of the geneticists that I first connected with, who's done a lot of work in this area. And found a particular gene, we call it the P gene, but basically it is what is the most common type in Africa. So if I'm in US, I may not see this gene very much unless I have someone of African descent or East African or sub-Saharan African descent. They might have this type 2, this particular type 2. So it's OCA2, but then there's an actual kind of subtype within it. And basically that means for me, well, what does it matter? Well, it means that some pigment is created. That means vision isn't quite as bad as maybe type 1. Type 1, if you have no vision, no pigment in your eyes, it can really be quite, it makes your vision worse. Not blind, but more like legally blind. So when we talk about kind of a range of vision, it can range all the way from just a little bit of impairment where just things are a little bit blurry, all the way up to I can't really drive a car because things are so blurred that I can't make out enough details, even with magnifiers, maybe special bioptic telescopes. Some people use that for seeing signs, road signs and such, depending on where you live and what's allowed. So in the scheme of albinism overall across the world, we'd say that this particular type is better in terms of vision not being as bad. But even within that, there's a broad range of presentation, clinical presentation. And that is because everybody's different. And if you combine it with high myopia, or if you have a really high glasses need when you're young and you don't get glasses on the child, you can have some amblyopia. And it's debatable, whether we call amblyopia. Amblyopia is when someone is kind of deprived of good vision when they're very young, maybe 0 to 6. And that means the brain and the eye don't fully develop to be able to allow you to see good vision. Sometimes you can still improve that situation even when a child is older or an adult is older, but there'll still be a limit of what you can do. But in albinism, it gets a little complicated because it's not that just that they were deprived of glasses and so they can't see. They actually have a physiological issue with this pigment. Pigment is really important. There is also skin cancer and skin cancer issues for sure. And so every organization that I work with usually works with skin cancer as well. And there's some horrific cases in Tanzania, but there are a lot of good advocacy efforts and healthcare provision now that are helping to fill those gaps, especially with Standing Voice. So I'll focus on the vision side, of course. So this is just a slide that kind of outlines different aspects of vision that are impacted when you don't have pigment. Pigment is super important, even as the baby is developing in the womb, and how the eyes are developing in the layers of the retina, and also in the two eyes working together, the brain connection. That is all pigment. It plays a role in all of that. So if you don't have pigment early on, or a very limited amount, then you're going to have some limited or underdeveloped structures in the eye. And that causes what's called foveal hypoplasia, which is just an underdevelopment of the very important part of our retina that helps us to see detail, reading and signs and faces. So an underdevelopment of our very detailed vision. I kind of think of it like if you were looking at one of those static TVs back in the 70s or 80s, where the picture didn't quite come in. Now, of course, I don't have albinism and I can't speak to that. And of course, Regina Mary can speak much more to that, but generally just saying it's difficult to see details. But there's no blind spots. There's no big missing areas. So there's not just this big gaps in vision that some other eye diseases cause. But there is also nystagmus where the eye is shaking. And that is because there's just not enough kind of development in the retina is what we think. Nystagmus is a tricky one, and there's different theories as to why you have it, but basically the eyes shake or jiggle. Usually it's a horizontal, meaning side to side. There's also strabismus that develops, which is when you have one eye that turns, and it can be either eye or it can be both eyes, but alternating. And so often you might see someone that has a big eye turn in albinism. And then depth perception is poor because remember again how that two eyes work together in the brain when the baby is developing in the womb. The nerve fiber layers don't cross correctly, and so you don't have good depth perception. Even if both eyes are straight, there's no strabismus. Rarely is there any actual depth perception beyond kind of major. So being able to see those little tricky books, where a wing pops out or different patterns pop out when you have your depth perception, that's not going to happen. But we can use one eye really, really well. And so there's, with a little bit of help with seeing some depth at distance, we use other cues to understand depth. So there's not a whole lot of loss there when there's no depth perception, because we do learn how to use one eye. The brain is amazing that way. And of course, everything's really bright because we have there's not enough pigment in the retina. The retina, actually, let me show you a couple pictures. So here's a couple pictures just of you can't see the nystagmus because it's not a live picture, but strabismus. Also, when you have an eye turn, there is a certain position typically with the eyes where it's a little more comfortable, and the nystagmus doesn't get in the way as much. It's the shaking slows down. Usually that's when the eyes are converged. So it's a good thing because reading, if your eyes stop shaking as much, it's a little easier to see what you're seeing. Now, when people have nystagmus, they don't actually notice the shaking themselves. Their brain has equalized it all and kind of put it all in this normative state. So they don't notice the world shaking. So it's not bothersome to them at all. Now, physiologically, when your eye's moving and you're only capturing a little bit of information when the best part of your vision is focused on a target, physically you can see that you're not getting as much visual information. So if the eyes were slower and you spent more time with the good part of your retina focused on what it needs to see, you would see a little bit better. So there are some surgeries out there to try to cut the eye muscles and then re-put them together, and that has shown to slow the nystagmus a little bit. But you have to be careful with that because there are risks to surgery. A good friend of mine actually had a retinal detachment because the muscle surgery, they just went a little too far, and that isn't normally, but it did happen in his case. And they did repair it, but it did leave him a little bit of eye damage. Again, a very rare thing. But I've seen several children that have had the surgery, and there's different ways of doing it. So if you're a parent thinking about this, definitely look into it and do some literature searches a little bit. There are different ways of doing it that maybe are a little bit more effective at just slowing the nystagmus a little bit. The strabismus, you could have a surgery for straightening the eye. The problem is the brain's still not going to put the two images together very well because the anatomy is different, right? So even if you straighten it, it's more for cosmetics so that maybe you don't feel as kind of embarrassed with an eye turn, because sometimes it's hard for society to understand an eye turn. And so if you wanted to look like your eyes were straight, that might be a possibility. You just have to weigh the risks, but you won't really see any better if you have that surgery. So range of visual acuity, if you're no acuity, is between 2100 to 2200 is where a lot of people fall, but they can be a little bit better than that. And I'm speaking in Snellen, which is American. I should be converting it to meters. So, but it's more mild to moderate impairment levels, not usually legal blindness or severe impairment because of these things. So here's just a couple pictures of the back of the eye, the retina itself, and kind of the underdevelopment of it. And basically we're supposed to have this little kind of pit or dip, and that's where we have our finest, best vision. And with albinism, typically that pit is shallow or even somewhat flat. So that's what causes quite a bit of the kind of blur or not able to distinguish detail very well. So here's an example of depth perception. So when we're doing a clinical test, just checking for that depth perception, and alternating our little cover paddle helps us to understand the eye turn. So that's an important thing to do in the exam, just to get an idea of what I want to know when I do an exam is which eye is the better eye, and which eye are we using on a regular basis. Question from Sylvia real quick. Does the surgery stop the movement of eyes or minimize it? It just minimizes it. Doesn't ever stop it. It might be just so slow that you don't see the movement as much, but it wouldn't be, I wouldn't count on it stopping it all the way. So if your child has really a lot of nystagmus, that might be worth considering. But if it's already just a little bit and you only really notice it, I don't think I would do it. Okay. So when I did these, the high refractive error, this is the other thing. So in the US, usually I would be looking at patients with far-sighted prescriptions with high astigmatism. Astigmatism is when the front of the eye, instead of it being nice round like the front of a basketball, is oval, and that's kind of like the surface of a football. And the reason it becomes oval, we think, is because with the nystagmus, with the movement of the eye and lids that are maybe a little bit more tighter lids, the movement might cause the shape of the cornea to go into more of this oblong manner. And it's okay. I mean, it doesn't cause any damage to the cornea or anything, but it does make things blurry at distance and at near. So astigmatism correction is an important thing in the glasses. But then that's what I expected. But what I found was also really, really high nearsightedness, with most people who had prescriptions being in the -8 to -12 range. That is really high myopia. And so one of the things I worried about is with high myopia is if the eye is getting longer as the child is developing, because they keep getting high, the numbers keep going up and up, or more myopia as you get older. How do we minimize that? And it's in the US, they're doing some studies around using drops to help relax the eyes a little bit and help to stop the myopia progression. But I don't think that's the case when you talk about someone who has really high myopia. That's probably either a genetic cause or because of the albinism itself. But why is it only in Africa and not in other places in the world? I have not figured that out, and I haven't found anyone who has, but I'm still trying to figure that out. So what I found in my groups is that about 40% of the population really needed high prescription. That means that 60%, so even if we generalize it and say half and half. Half the population needs strong glasses and the other half doesn't. So when I would do these clinics with 300 children, some of the kids are like, I want glasses. I'm like, oh, you don't need them. Well, how do you explain you don't need glasses when they still can't see well because of the visual impairment from the actual structures of the eye? That was always super hard, So when children wanted glasses because everyone else got them, that it was like, oh, shall I give you just fake glasses with nothing really in them? But those are things sometimes we do in the US. It's just to help someone as they're adjusting, or because the child's pretending like they can't see. But in albinism, it's definitely still visual impairment, so they definitely need something. But this just means when we're talking about distance, they may not need glasses, or glasses may not be helpful. At near, though, we might do glasses to help with magnification. So, bringing things close is what people normally do, and that makes things bigger. But that takes a lot of effort on your eye, and the accommodation, this little lens in here, has to actually change and move, which it does naturally for us until we're about 40. Then we need reading glasses because things slow down and get a little more rigid. But for a child, they're really flexible. So they could hold things really close and magnify and be able to see things that way. But doing that long period of time for reading books can be really exhausting, can make them tired, headaches, just isn't very efficient. So I like to prescribe help with the reading glasses just to help with some of that effort. So that's one of the big strategies in low vision, is to really provide some reading glasses. Now, if they're nearsighted, they're already focused for a really close distance, but it's set. So if they're a -10, their actual best clear distance is going to be at 10 centimeters. So they actually already have, by removing glasses, a built-in magnifier. So I might not do anything for that distance, but let's say that person wants to look at their computer. Well, I actually need to get them further away from their computer so that they're a little bit more comfortable, because no one wants to read their computer only a couple inches away. So this is where I might do some glasses that help kind of in between and partially correct the myopia to help at least the computer screen be in better focus. So Regina Mary, those are things that for you, I want us to be thinking about, is maybe we need to help you with something in between to help you with your phone and your computer without having to take off the glasses to get your focal distance. Okay, I want to get to more of kind of our talking, so I'm going to run through these a little bit. I would always do a trial frame refraction. I was talking about retinoscopy. So when you go to a doctor who knows low vision, that's usually who you want to find, is someone who specializes in low vision. They may not be a specialist in albinism, but they'll have at least the basic ideas. And then if they are even more an expert in albinism, then woohoo. But because it's fairly rare, especially in the US, and it's definitely more common in Africa, but because it's it's a recessive gene, and so mom and dad don't know they have the gene, then they have a child with albinism. So because it's recessive, 1 in 4 of their children might have it. Now, it might be more children just because of the odds of things, but typically, statistically, would say 1 in 4 would have albinism. And that child with albinism then has to marry somebody else with a recessive gene of albinism. Even if they're fully pigmented, it would be a hidden gene, and then they would have a child. Doesn't just mean someone with albinism automatically has a child. No, they would have a fully pigmented child if they were with someone who did not have the albinism gene. So that always surprises people, because they think, wait, if I have albinism, I'm going to have a child with albinism. No, not necessarily. I won't tell a story, but she's just a little sweetie, and her prescription's about -16, and she went from like a first grade level or grade 1 to really advancing in about 4 or 5 years. She made up, I think, about 8 years of school. So really bright girl once she got all of her tools and was able to see. So other ways to hold things close, reading stands can be helpful to be able to modify your distance where you're working. For distance, I like to prescribe telescopes, and a handheld monocular is what I use in all my programs in Africa. It's very inexpensive, compared to other types of telescopes. And just a 3x or 4x. I wouldn't go up to like an 8x. Sometimes in schools, the teachers of visual impairment will give a really high-powered one just because they're kind of used to, giving the biggest, strongest thing. But only a 3 or 4x is needed with albinism, and that gives you a little bigger field of view and helps you still see things that are small print. So in the classroom, this can be really helpful. So part of our program in Standing Voice would always be to train children on using the monocular. They don't have to close the other eye. They're using their dominant eye, and the other eye, the brain just ignores that vision when they're really focused using their better eye. So that's why it's always important to figure out which eye is the one they're using the most. They may use both, but they're not using them together. It's more of an alternating situation usually. And this is just a picture of the back of the eye to show you normal retina is kind of on the right. It's kind of grainy. I apologize for that. And then the picture on the left is the one without pigment. So pigment acts as a sunglass. It's really good, like absorber. It's really important for our eyes. So the more pigment you have, the better in terms of absorbing light. So and this also is true in the iris, in the front part of the eye. The reason the eyes look a little more in Tanzania, they're kind of hazel colored, but they would typically be dark brown. And so they're just missing some of the pigment. If you have a type 1, then their eyes look blue, and they're actually very thin because pigment is actually pretty thick, and it makes kind of like a thick curtain, keeping light out. But when you have thin blue irises, there's a lot of light that are actually getting through here, like a really thin curtain. And when we shine light a little differently, we can see all this light that's kind of sneaking around the edges. So that's why glare is a big deal. So even indoor, I like to do some kind of a tint or filter, and then outdoor, a little darker one. It could be that the glasses change or transition. We had those on the hike where we had transition glasses, and they were amazing. They were the extra dark ones worked really well until we got to the really high ones. High levels, then we used goggles. But they're really expensive too. So, how do you provide that on a regular basis? Well, just some fit overs can be useful, or tinting the glasses is an inexpensive way to do it. So those are just a summary of some of my low vision strategies. Glasses for distance, near, intermediate, even thinking a little bit more about reading and helping out with long-term reading just for some of the comfort. Magnification and distance could be a telescope, a handheld, or there's special bioptic telescopes that can be put onto the glasses. They still stick out, but they can be really helpful in college settings or to be able to see the blackboard and things like that. But they're much more expensive, so depending on who has those resources. And then magnification near, there's a lot of apps on your phone that can magnify, and also video magnifiers, a little handheld video magnifier for seeing paper text. That can be really great too, but those can be a little more costly. So just hand magnifier or reading glasses can be good, but having the right power is important. And that's why going to the low vision doctor is going to be important. And then glare management, of course. So I'm going to pause there, and I just want to go ahead, and if you guys have questions, go ahead and type them into the chat for now. And then I'm going to turn it over to Regina Mary, because I want her to tell you a little bit. What I wanted to get was perspective of someone who has visual impairment, of course, but also access to services, because we always was, for the providers saying, hey, come see me. How do they know about you? How do they even find you? So Regina Mary, you and I have been friends for quite some time. And recently I said, hey, we got to make sure you have a low vision visit, low vision exam. And she went to our good friend Hazel and just had that recently. Can you tell us a little bit, did you know about low vision doctors or providers who could do these things for you before that? I mean, I know you knew of me, but it was always kind of a vague idea, right? Not necessarily known to you.
Thank you again, and thank you so much for all that information. It would really be great if the video that we have could be distributed as well, so that it could be constant information that people could use who don't know, who could know, for teachers, for the awareness programs. It's so important. So in terms of my experience recently, I first didn't know that there's actually a low vision specialist that actually is able to understand the eyesight that people with albinism like myself have. And I thought an optometrist is just a doctor that checks eyes, but it was not. That this particular one has a better understanding to my eyesight, has a better understanding to certain things that I am not able to express. That was one. So that was actually a very big eye opener to understand that if I am going to look for an eye specialist, it's very important that I am aware that is this person, do they understand albinism? Do they understand that my sight is different? And as the different types of albinism have been explained, it's different for everybody. So that was the first step that was like, okay, now this is very clear, because I've had a few eye testings, and it was discussions where I was also told that you've not been wearing glasses from a very long time, since you were a child, so your sight has deteriorated. So basically, there's not much that can be done for you. This is what it is. I was also told you cannot see far. This is your sight. You almost, actually not blind, but you can't see. So I can't do anything, whether you have glasses or you don't have glasses. So it was different from each experience that I had. And when I got to this particular one this last week, there was a more of conversation into what are you seeing? And there were times when the different lenses were changed and it almost looks like it's the same thing, but there's just a tiny bit of I wouldn't explain it, a difference or something, and you're not sure whether you should be open about it or say no, it's the same or no. But the Dr. Hazel would like, no, tell me if even if it's like a tit, just something that happens, let me know. And then at most times when you are doing the eye test, maybe for me, I'll speak about my experience. When I'm doing the eye test, it's almost like when the doctor puts out the lines in front of you, it's almost like you need to do whatever it takes to actually see them. So I'm fighting to say, let me get those words right. And in the process, I am straining my eyes. So she's like, no, do not fight. Don't try and push too hard to see it. Tell me what you see from where you are. So it's like, okay, so I can actually just be relaxed and look and tell her what I see. And the truth is that I was able to see what I could, and what I couldn't see, I was able to say, no, I can't see that. And it's also got to understand that when I put on my glasses, I can I can see words, but not so close, but there's just like this I don't know how to put it, almost like enhancement that happens. It doesn't bring the content closer or anything bigger, but there's just like if it was black, it goes a bit darker, and it's like the vision is more actually very clear. But if I take off my glasses, there's a moment where it feels um like things just went blurry, and you think, is it a process where is it because I took off my glasses and now I need time for my eyes to kind of try and find their balancing? And it's like, no, it's not because they're trying to find balance, but this is what happens. If you take off your glasses, this is your vision. When you put on your glasses, this is what you see. So it's very important to actually have your glasses on all the time, because it does really make a huge difference, because it sometimes feels like maybe it's a process. Like when I'm during my acting sessions, there's time when I have to remove my glasses because we have to do rehearsals and dancing, and I don't want my glasses to fall. But I realize that when I take off my glasses, I cannot see the choreographer doing the dance moves. Then I get depressed. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Because I really can't see him. So I have to put them back on and just deal with the process as it goes. And another thing that happened is that I also got to find out that when I'm reading something up close, I can't really use my glasses with them. And she said, no, that's not a problem because you are nearsighted. So when you're nearsighted, this is exactly how you see things. So this is how you read stuff. You read them up close, which is something that I think after this interview is something that as a woman with albinism and advocating for others, it's something we can be open about in the public space. Because like I said, also my experience as an actress, when I'm given a script, I would run to sit like that and look cool, but I'm not going to see anything. So I would have to bring the script very close to my face. And in the room, it looks like, oh my gosh, are you struggling? Are you in pain? Oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like, no, I'm not struggling. I'm not in pain. This is exactly how I need to see something, you know? So sometimes I'm in fear that if I do that, they'll be like, no, maybe we're putting too much pressure on her. We should remove her from this production. But no, so it's very nice that we're having this amazing conversation. And there's another element of color, something I think most people, which I never got in my other previous testings, it's about construct. When you put something white on a black background, you actually get to pick it up faster. If you put something black on a white thing, it actually gets to be picked up fast. And also the lighting in the room, especially for high schools, because in school there's light coming through the windows, there's light everywhere, and the blackboard is green and the white chalk. I don't know if things have changed or in different countries it's different, but also that has a bit of a problem in terms of how you are going to see those things. So you end up trying to squint, and when you squint, it kind of does strain your eyes, and then so many other things take place. And another beautiful thing I learned is that in terms of being vocal about the size of of words that we need to see. Dr. Hazel, actually, we had a test with my own site in terms of what is the actual size that I need to have in printed form so that wherever I go, whether it's my theater, it's at school, or I'm doing a presentation, I'm able to tell the person that, listen, I cannot see the tiny little print that you've put for me, but I can read it, but I cannot see. So please, can you extend it to maybe 1820? So it's so important that each person gets to understand the size of font that they can actually see, so that it's something that becomes part of you, where you don't feel that the other person doesn't understand, because some of the times people don't know. And it's my responsibility to tell the next person that if you give me this size of words, first and foremost, I really have to look this close. And if I make a mistake, it disturbs my focus. It disturbs the fact that I think, oh my gosh, I'm stupid, I'm doing this wrong, and everything just becomes a mess. But with having a low vision specialist that can talk you through this process and tell you why certain things are happening, it's such an amazing experience. And I also had a chance, I heard about the bio something word with the
Bioptic telescope.
bio biotic telescope. Yes, I heard about it. I've seen it with certain women with albinism who are driving, maybe one or two. They're not very out there, but it's like, what is that on their eyes? And I got a chance to actually put them on, and it's almost like, it's crazy. But at that moment when you put them on, you just feel like, oh my God, this is how the world looks. Oh my God, like everything just comes close. It's like, is that painting over there? Oh, is that her teeth? Is like everything is just in so much detail. Like, I had to be honest with Dr. Hazel when I told her, like, for my own personal experience, when I see a person with my naked eye, I can see you're a human being, you're standing straight, but I cannot see the detail on your face. If you are smiling, or you're making faces, or you go, I won't be able to tell all those details. But I see you're in the room. And also, it depends on the amount of distance that you are close or far. So sometimes, in terms of how you survive, you have to know the person's voice, you have to know what the person is wearing, you have to know how this person walks. You just have to master a way to say, whoever walks in this room, before I identify who they are, maybe I knew what they wore before they left. I knew this. But for me to actually get details of this person's facial expression and details, we have to be very close, which also is a very big problem in terms of crime. When an incident happens and a policeman asks you to describe the features of this human being, and you're like, but I can't, you know? And that's one of the challenges I faced when I experienced the rape incident. And the police told me, describe the person that violated you. And the truth is, I couldn't describe that person because I could not see their actual detail for me to tell you that they've got a mustache and they've got a small eye and they've got this and they've got that. So when I had actually put on the bio, I'll get it right eventually, the bio thingy, it felt like everything was just like, this is how beautiful the world looks. You know, things come very close, and I was like, why? Why can't we have these in our glasses? But yes, it's like a magnifier, so it brings things extremely close than they are. You get to see stuff, so you look out and you see things come close, and then when you look down, it's the actual size. But that would also be very, very powerful if students had that in a classroom, because it would really, 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 it would really, really help in terms of getting details on the chalkboard. Because my greatest challenge in high school was, I already can't see. That's one. Two, I already couldn't read or write. So even when the next person was trying to spell, to say, the sentence says, the door is open, I couldn't even spell the door is open. So if somebody can actually be able to spell and write, but they cannot see, it helps. But having to have information brought to you in detail, you realize that maybe the problem sometimes is that you've been struggling to see. I also had Dr. Hazel give me some stuff to read. And because they were so thick and they were so big, I actually read them than I would actually do it throughout being so, so scared. So it was a very, very awesome experience. It was fair, and there was no room to say, let me just tell her I see, even if I don't see. And when I don't see, it's like, it feels like maybe I'm being too much, because when they keep changing, like, and this one, like, no, and this one is like, maybe I should lie. But the beautiful thing is that we don't have to lie. We don't have to lie, because the truth is that with these opportunities, there is a solution. It's not 100%, but it's the beginning to say, I can also see this beautiful world as everybody sees it. So, yes. Do I still have more time, Rebecca? Sorry.
No, I think we have to wrap up, but I appreciate that very much. This was during your exam. I wasn't there, but these are ones that actually flip up out of the way so that, let's say you were in the classroom, you could flip them down when you wanted to see them. So there are lots of different tools and gadgets. Some of them are, much more expensive than others, and sometimes they're hard to obtain in different countries. But if you do live in South Africa and we've got several low vision providers, and I don't know, Karen or Belinda, how do you, as far as sharing resources for those in the area, and I don't know where our listeners are coming from. They could be from, anywhere in the world. It can be a little difficult. What you can try to do, I wonder if they can email you, if anybody has an email address.
Rebecca, so we have the Low Vision website, which is www.lvcol.co.za, and that gives the service providers around the country. And I think that would be a very good idea if people go on there. And we have listed service providers under the various provinces, so they can find optometrists, OTs, because as you know, that's really important, because I know you used to work with an OT as well. And that's really important to get the multidisciplinary approach to working with this. There are a couple of questions. Kay, if you want to take questions.
There are just two questions that are still unanswered. The first one is, I wanted to know more about the use of telescopes. She was kicked out by Zoom or possibly load shedding.
So I think, that question came in before Regina started talking about her experience. So hopefully if she can watch this back, she'll have a little bit more information. We could have a whole talk about different telescopes, but, depending on what's available where, I don't want to talk about a device that isn't available.
And then the second one is comments from my experience. I'm an OT in education in district level. I find that educators of learning with albinism may seek assessment accommodation only at grade 12 level. I'm working on advocacy for all learners with albinism in my district to access support in all grades. Learners are often bullied and persecuted. I encourage general advocacy for all educators and learners in the school.
Absolutely. I'm so thankful for you. I would say as soon as a child is starting to even read, and even at 2-3 years old, just to check the refractive status, we decided that in our program, we would see children 8 years and above, because anybody who is 8 years and below, they might need some tools, but could they handle use of a telescope? There are some very sharp little 6-year-olds that could do that. But even the glasses and refractive error tends to get worse as you get older. And so by about 8 is when I found that they really needed something. Before that, they would break it or not necessarily use it as very much. But in a city or a town, getting early intervention is really important, especially for parents to understand what's available and how to help and so on. And then usually that exam can help. Usually we would write a letter and help the teacher to, and yourself or whoever's in the school helping the child with where to sit in the classroom. Even the strabismus and null position can be assisted depending on where you sit in the classroom, could be a little bit better on one side or the other. So it's nice to have that guidance and partnership with your professionals. And I just wanted to, Belinda, just the whole point, OTs, absolutely. Occupational therapists really help take whatever's in kind of the exam room and these findings about eyes and vision and so on, and really make them come to life in real life so that the patient, the person, Regina Mary doesn't have to just figure it all out. Now she's a bright gal and she's already like, oh, contrast. How can I make that work? Black on white. But there's so many things that we just don't think about that OTs help us to integrate and practice and set goals for and achieve, that really take anything that's done in the exam room, expand upon it, and really bring it into reality. Because sometimes we have some unrealistic things in the exam room where we're like, oh, this would be ideal. And then the OTs will come and say to me, oh, that didn't really work in real life. This works better, or this tool works better, or this habit works better. And so I should have talked much more about that in my talk, but I do appreciate OTs and how much work they do to fill in.
And then we do have one hand up from Nomasonto. I see you unmuted. You can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. My gadget is now playing games on me. I would like to comment to say thank you very much for this consultation. It is what we need. I think if we can do more of these, I want to congratulate Regina and the team that we as persons with albinism should avoid working in silos, because what is shared today should be shared every day, everywhere, even in the most remote area. But that can only be done when we work together. I commend the Low Vision Clinic and the OT people, and I'm interested to know, Carmen, that which district are you working? Because we must do a good practice. Because if it's a certain district,
Nomasonto, where are you?
I'm in Johannesburg.
Are you a teacher? Do you have albinism?
My camera is disappointing me. I have albinism. I started the Albinism Society of South Africa. I was a teacher, and I struggled a lot. And what I want to put through is that even our medical aids don't cater for us. As I speak, I was at GEMS right away today to say my spectacles will be expiring in 2, 3, 5 months. So I'm tired of paying the extra 3,000 for the shade and the protect, the blue chip, all of those. And I happen to have traveled to the US. Let me not take a lot of time. I know the binoculars or the telescopes, but they are very expensive.
They are.
I think once somebody was saying, I'm starting an organization and we would like to fundraise to at least give 5 people a year the telescopes. But finances in South Africa are so depleted that nobody would like to listen to you. But let me say, all in all, I'm so excited, and I think this workshop should be done maybe quarterly so that we invite more people. Before that, we must find data for people, because yes, we all have smartphones, but we don't have data. And now with the huge fofo of ESCOM, but we will find that if a person missed this one, in 3 months' time, maybe in Jan, we'll be having another one. Then people can join in. So let's become a working group and enlightening, specifically to parents of children with albinism that are just starting, just got a baby, they just don't know what to do. And the OT and the vision goes together, because this child is crawling in the house, knocking everything, because parents don't understand that we've got low vision because of our lack of melanin in our eyes. Thank you. I am very grateful for whoever started this, and I would recommend, I'll give my email address to Regina, and I would like to be contacted and put in the team of the working group. Thank you.
Nomasonto, what you can do is just give Regina your contact details. And Regina, if you can send them through to me, we do run a low vision WhatsApp group. And we actually do these talks twice a month. Sometimes we do them more often. The plan is next year that we will be doing them twice a month, and we are getting sponsors, we hope, to do the webinars and to go back to running them for free if we can get the sponsorship.
Just to point out, Nomasanto, that you mentioned people who missed this talk. It will be available on our website from early next week.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you look on our website, we have 65 webinars that we have done already. So feel free to go on there.
I gotta jump off because I'm due for another call, but I love all the interest. Let me know if I can help in the future.
Thank
Rebecca,
you.
that was fantastic. Thank you so much. To everybody else, our next talk will be next week, and that is on printing of 3D devices, etc., which makes learning more accessible for visually impaired learning. And the talk the following week will be on equine therapy for children with visual impairments. Just before we leave, are there any more questions? Oh, Robin, is there a list of advocacy resources for albinism available, Regina?
Thank you so much again. I just want to also say thank you to Mam Nomasonto. She's actually the founder of the Albinism Association of South Africa. So that it's just an honor for her to be part of this amazing discussion. Yes, definitely. One with myself, like I also said, Miss Nomasonto has an organization. And I saw on the participation group, there's also different activists, Beauty by Nature. There are different organizations that are available. Each of them have different activisms that they're doing, but we are all in one goal. So yes, they are there. We just need more and more information, just like today. We have organizations, we've got people that have albinism that we need to empower, to coach, and give them information. And they do exist, but the information we have is not as powerful as the extra information we learned today. And on top of everything, when Rebecca was doing her presentation, she talked about the blisters on the face, the spots and everything, and she wasn't aware how does one get that. Those blisters come from the sunburn. If I go in the sun constantly, and I do not have proper sunscreen and creams, it happens that those blisters become sores and they become wounds, and then they become part of me, and it looks like some people have blisters and some don't. No, but some people have been exposed in the sun far too long than others. So yes, they are organizations, but they need more information, they need more resources, they need more equipment, and they need further footage and evidence that could go out in schools, hospitals, clinics, just basically in the whole public space, not just small places where we have to talk about each other to each other, but have circulation of such type of platforms in schools as a very, very important platforms for teachers, for doctors. When a child is born, it's like the worst experience because nurses actually are the first people that react to the fact that, oh my God, this child is different. So yes, they are there, but we could do with a whole lot of support worldwide. Thank you.
Robin would like a list of contact information, please.
If you will share it to Hazel at lowvision.co.za. If you'll share the list to her, we will add it onto our website.
Okay, all right. I'll be able to do that.
Thank you.
All right. Perfect. Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, then thank you very much to our speakers. And we have many new people here today, and I hope that you will spread the word. And we really want to create far more awareness of how much is available. We do not want people to get to grade 12 and only then discover how much can be done. We really want people to know from early on that there is a lot of help out there. Thank you very much and wish you all a pleasant night. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.